When I was in Iraq, one of the many places that I had the opportunity to visit was the city of Ur. The city of Ur is right outside of Nasiriyah, and Nasiriyah is a large population center of a couple 100,000 people, so it's a fairly large city. That is the city where Jessica Lynch, if anybody remembers back, that's the city that she was captured. Our camp was about 2-3 miles outside of the city of Nasiriyah, and we were at a camp called Cedar originally, and it was like a dust, it was just a dust bowl. And then they moved us further a little bit in, closer to the city of Ur, and just outside of the base of Talil Air Base. That was an Air Force base, and it's pretty big geographically. It has a lot of stuff in the surrounding area before you get into the actual city of Nasiriyah. So the air base was an old Iraqi air base, and then when we came back in, we took it over, and then the Air Force occupied it. We had run missions back and forth out of there. But today what I'm going to talk about is the ancient city of Ur. This historical significance is it was settled between 6200 and 6500 BC, and the historical point was it was said or believed to be the birthplace of the prophet Abraham and the beginnings of the belief in God. So all of it kind of started right here. I'm not a biblical scholar, so if I get any of this wrong, blame Bill.
Okay, no problem. We're on the same page already.
So the Sumerians came from the highlands of northern, and I pronounce this stuff probably incorrectly, and Teloa, around 3000 BC, and settled in the area of Ur about 900 BC. Prophet Abraham was born in 570 BC of Azar, and later married Sarah before immigrating from Ur to continue calling people to God. The background from Ur: Abraham and his wife Sarah, nephew Lot, born his brother Haran, left for Egypt, and they believed that no one was going to follow in his call, so they left this kind of temple area, and that's where they began their journey. There's just some historical lineage. For those of you guys who probably follow and read the Bible, probably recognize a lot of these names. So the journey took him from Ur, and he went up, kind of followed the Fertile Crescent, and then came back into Egypt. Oh, there it is. That's the next slide there. So geographically, is basically left Iraq and then went to Egypt. So what is it that I kind of had the opportunity to do? I was actually able to go several times to this actual site where his birthplace was and where he actually physically left from. So the ruins of Ur were found and first excavated by British Consul G.E. Taylor, who partly uncovered the ziggurat of Nana. The British Museum began excavations there in 1919 and was joined later by the University Museum of the University of Pennsylvania. The expedition completely excavated the ziggurat, the entire temple area of Ur, and parts of the residential and commercial quarters of the city. The most spectacular discovery was the Royal Cemetery. It contains art, treasures of gold, silver, bronze, and precious stones.
Do they know why that particular peoples collected things in their cemeteries, or did they speculate on that?
No. I got some of the artifacts down here later on. So Ur was excavated by Leonard Woolley, contained about 1,800 burials, classified 16 of these as royal based on the distinctive form, their wealth, and the fact that they contained the burial of servants and other high-ranking personage, along with the royal person. This is the man who did a lot of the excavations. He was credited with the excavation of the city of Ur in 1922 to 1934. After that, in 1934, everybody was pretty much banned, and then there hadn't been anybody actually on this site until the current operation when we went in there in 2003.
He was the Indiana Jones of his time.
Probably.
Yeah.
So the site was buried underneath 15 feet of blowing silt and sand. The excavation process was too tedious due to the extreme weather at Ur. Like I said before, back then, it still hadn't changed. It was still tedious weather. It was horrible. People ask what it's like, and it's almost to the point of if you had a big oven, you turned it on broil, and you stuck your head as close as you could to that, and then you took those big warehouse fans and you pointed them at you, and then somebody took pancake batter or pancake mix and just threw it in your face all day long. That's what it's like in this area. It's not very pleasant. Let's see if this will play. This is our camp. Those are our tents. And this was a daily occurrence. So you get up and at like probably 8:30 or 9 in the morning, this would start and it would go all day until about 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night. So you'd have literally a layer of probably 1 or 2 inches of dust literally over everything every day. And it was good times.
Is that good for machinery? Is that kind of stuff good for machinery and weapons?
No.
Character building.
It got so bad that they closed down all the chow halls and the facilities, and you couldn't eat any freshly prepared food, so we all had to revert back to the MREs and eat them because the sand would just literally get into everything. So, let's see if I can get back here. Uh-oh. So there's the layout on the right side. The ziggurat, and I'll get more into that, is the kind of the main center of everything in this area. There's the ziggurat in the top right, and then the burial sites off to the right if you're, or off to your left if you're looking at it now. And then the dwelling quarters, and I'll talk specifically about each of those in a minute. There's an actual aerial photo of what it looks like, not today, but back in 2003 when we visited. And then there's kind of the relationship between where everything sits still in relation to that pictorial representation. The ziggurat is a colossal step platform similar to pyramids and built as a holy site to honor various gods. They're all over in various places throughout the world, but this is believed to be one of the oldest. So they form a temple common to the Sumerians, Babylonians, and Assyrians. The earliest example of the date from the end of the 3rd millennial BC, the latest from 6th century BC. The ziggurat is a pyramidal structure built in descending tiers upon rectangular oval square platform with a shrine at the summit. And you actually get in there, and these are actual pictures that I was able to take, and they still have the hieroglyphics and the different things inside of the various areas in the dwelling quarters and the burial sites. What it says, I have no idea, but I'm sure it said something. So this just kind of talks about how it's accessed, and this In this one, it's accessed through the main stairs in the front. So it was built, this ziggurat was built as a tribute to the god Sin, and was called, I have no idea. Anybody know that word? All right.
I could say it, but then I have to kill myself.
Which meant a house whose foundation creates terror. So that was the significance of this site. And like I said, when you're there and you're standing there, you don't really get a sense of what it is. And I think after coming home, and then you start thinking about this stuff, and you think about the actual, Moses actually was here on these grounds, walking around, is pretty cool. And you actually reflect back on it, and you're like, it's hard to believe that kind of this is where it all started. So they uncovered numerous artifacts. These are different pictures that the actual dig discovered. So one of them was a ram caught in a thicket. I'm not going to go through all this. And some of the places that it's still held, so you can actually go see this stuff here in the United States and Baghdad. The Standard of Ur. This one's in the British Museum in London. This is dated, 2,600 years before Christ, so it's pretty old.
So that probably tells a story of some sort.
Mm-hmm. Silver boat. Same thing, pretty old. And then a golden bull. And what's pretty neat is these are all still artifacts that are that old that are still intact. So these are pretty ancient artifacts. And then they have a variety of masks. So these are some of the pictures that I actually took on ground. And I'll get it in a folder where you can see them a little better. It's a huge structure. It's hard to kind of put it into perspective, but for those of you guys who have been down to Cahokia Mounds, it's significantly bigger than that, but it's not too much bigger as like a footprint wise.
Looks like you were there during some non-sandy wind-blowing days.
Yes. So during the day, depending on where you are, maybe it was just our camp that the military, the Army probably found the worst conditions possible. And that's where they said, we're going to build your camp. Like I said, this was on the Air Force side.
How many steps up the ramp, do you know?
I do not.
Okay.
So I'll just flip through some pictures here and then. So some interesting stories, and I'll just kind of wrap up with this and then I can answer some questions or whatever. But kind of right there where that SUV is a guy, and he is like the guide of this property. Not the owner of it, but over the years, for centuries, his family has been going there and just kind of plotting themselves down and not maintaining it or anything, just pretty much there is just a so no one went on there and maybe defaced it or anything. But he had been doing this, I think he was just, you know, I can't remember, but generation-wise, they had been doing this for hundreds of years. And this has been passed down, I guess a duty passed down. And when we originally arrived there as the military, all of this was just unprotected. And it was just, you could walk up to it and do all of that and kind of visit it and come and go as you please. And then when the Air Force came in, and the Army, and they put this structure within the perimeter. So this now fell into the safety and security of the Air Force, and then you had to go into the Air Force base and then access the ground. So it added some level of protection, but then, as you can imagine, as more people filtered in, and this was a pretty big hotspot of people traveling through Iraq. This was a big base, so a lot of people would stop, and then a lot of soldiers and service members would visit. So it got to the point where you can imagine literally thousands of people were trampling on this ground that was once just the ground. So the military didn't really restrict access to it. But what was funny is back to the guy that was kind of the guide, is once we started getting there, you could see that the military started to like funnel different ideas to the guy, and they were like, hey, you know, why don't you start charging $1 or a goodwill offering for everybody that comes and visits this. So it was funny, over time you would see the guy out there, and there'd be lines of soldiers, and they'd be given dollars. So you can just imagine if a couple 100,000 soldiers probably visited this over a couple years period, how much money at even a dollar
program, yeah.
would had generated for this.
You have a later picture with his Mercedes.
So, what was funny, so then when we left, by the time we left, we had built just structures probably as big as this room, and then it was like 4 offices. It was just like a little pole barn kind of building without metal. It was just a wooden structure, and it was probably this large. And when we got done and we were leaving, usually what happens is if no one wants to occupy the stuff that you had or take it over, then it was either just burned or scrapped. So what we did is we put it on the back of a truck, one of our trucks, and we actually hauled it over to this guy, and we set the structure about where the white vehicle is. So now this guy had a living quarters or some office kind of space to run whatever he wanted out of. So it's pretty interesting, the dynamics, and you know, he had a lot of stuff, and it would be a personal tour. Didn't really speak a lot of English. After a while, originally when we went there, you could, like when I first went there, we could actually go into the burial sites and walk down into the excavated areas, but then over time they started limiting access to all those just because they didn't want thousands of soldiers trampling through the area. But these are kind of up close pictures of the, see what I'm saying? See, that was us trampling over stuff. So it wasn't really good, but at that time, you know, you weren't really.
You plan to follow the leader there?
I was probably the leader with the camera.
Okay.
Still good shape.
Just so you know, this is your 1-minute warning.
Sure.
Okay.
That guy in the blue, he's the tour guy.
Keep that button, it'll flip it to the left.
So, sorry.
Looks like a sniper rifle.
That's a picture of oil actually coming out of the ground. So, and that's all over Iraq. You would see that. So when they say it actually comes to the surface, it actually comes to the surface. I don't know what that is. I don't remember what that is, but there was something like a keystone in various places to mark historical significance of events.
Like a the tree.
Yeah, that's the options from Commode, isn't it?
So I really don't know what happened to this now. It's kind of always in the back of my mind. If people always ask me that was our commander, if I ever had a chance to revisit it, would I? I think I definitely would. I think I'd spend a lot more time on the historical understanding of it versus the way we were just kind of marched through real quick and didn't really get a lot of time to explore and do different things.